A quiet morning turns loud. The early morning air in downtown Los Angeles was unusually crisp. The streets bustled with the usual morning routine, coffee shops opening, joggers pounding the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic growing as the city woke up. Keanu Reeves, clad in a simple black hoodie and jeans, blended seamlessly into the crowd as he strolled down a quiet street near a local park. Beside him trotted a young dog, a scruffy golden retriever mix he'd affectionately named Sunny. Sunny was more than just a pet. The pup was a rescue, saved from an overcrowded shelter during Keanu's downtime between film shoots. In the short weeks since adopting him, Keanu had found Sunny to be a beacon of joy, a playful companion who greeted every day with boundless energy and unwavering loyalty. "Easy boy," Keanu murmured as Sunny tugged at the leash, his tail wagging like a propeller. The dog's enthusiasm for life often led him into mischief, but Keanu didn't mind. To him, these moments of chaos were a welcome reprieve from the controlled environment of film sets and media appearances. They approached a small coffee stand by the park's entrance. The vendor, a cheerful man named Joe, greeted Keanu with familiarity. "Morning, Mr. Reeves. Usual black coffee?" "Morning, Joe. You got it," Keanu replied, his voice low but warm. He leaned down to scratch behind Sunny's ears as the dog sniffed curiously at the edge of the stand. As Joe prepared the coffee, a loud rumble broke the morning's tranquility. 3 motorcycles roared past, their engines echoing off the nearby buildings. Keanu glanced over his shoulder, watching as the bikers parked haphazardly near the park entrance. They were dressed in leather jackets adorned with patches, their laughter coarse and exaggerated as they dismounted their bikes. Sunny growled softly, his body stiffening as the group approached the park. "It's okay, boy," Keanu said, tightening his grip on the leash. He wasn't one to judge by appearances, but something about the biker's demeanor set him on edge. Joe handed Keanu his coffee. "That bunch has been hanging around here the past week," he said quietly, "always causing trouble. Last night, they knocked over one of my tables just for laughs." Keanu frowned but said nothing. Instead, he sipped his coffee and guided Sunny towards the park, hoping to avoid any interaction with the rowdy group. He had no intention of letting their antics ruin the peaceful morning he planned with his dog. The encounter. The park was a sanctuary amidst the urban chaos. Towering trees lined the pathways, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Sunny trotted happily beside Keanu, occasionally stopping to sniff a bush or bark at a squirrel. Keanu couldn't help but smile at the dog's antics, feeling a rare sense of calm. But the serenity didn't last long. As they rounded a corner near an open field, the bikers appeared again. They were gathered near a bench, smoking and laughing loudly. One of them, a burly man with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, noticed Keanu and Sunny approaching. His eyes narrowed, and a smirk crept onto his face. "Hey, look at that mutt," the man jeered, nudging his companions. "Bet he couldn't fight off a mouse." Keanu ignored them, keeping his focus on Sunny. But the dog, sensing the tension, growled softly. The scared man's smirk widened. He took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel path. "What's the matter, mutt?" he sneered. "You scared?" "Leave it," Keanu said firmly, his voice steady but cold. He didn't look at the man, but his tone carried enough weight to make the other bikers pause. Scarface, however, wasn't deterred. "What, you the mutt's bodyguard?" he taunted, stepping even closer. "Think you're some big shot?" Keanu stopped walking. He turned slowly to face the man, his expression calm but unyielding. "Just taking my dog for a walk," he said. "Why don't you let us do that in peace?" Scarface laughed, a loud, grating sound that grated on Keanu's nerves. "Oh, I see. You think you're some kind of tough guy." Before Keanu could respond, Scarface's boot shot out, aiming for Sunny. The dog yelped as the kick connected, and Keanu's calm demeanor evaporated in an instant. His coffee cup fell to the ground as he stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Don't," he said, his voice low and filled with warning. "Don't ever touch my dog again." Scarface took a step back, surprised by the sudden intensity in Keanu's tone. But his bravado returned quickly. "Relax, man. It's just a dog." Keanu's eyes darkened. "He's not just a dog." The standoff drew the attention of other parkours, who began to gather at a safe distance, their phones out and recording. Scarface seemed to realize he was losing the upper hand. He spat on the ground near Keanu's feet and motioned for his friends to leave. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he sneered before walking away. The other bikers followed, their laughter fading as they disappeared down the path. The fallout. Keanu knelt down to check on Sonny, who had retreated behind him. The dog's tail was tucked between his legs, and he whimpered softly. "You're okay, boy," Keanu said, his voice soothing. "I've got you." Joe, the coffee vendor, arrived moments later, having seen the commotion from a distance. "You all right, Mr. Reeves?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "We're fine," Keanu replied, though his clenched jaw betrayed his lingering anger. He straightened, his eyes scanning the park for any sign of the bikers. "Thanks for checking." Joe hesitated and said, "Those guys, they'd been causing trouble all over. Someone should report them." Keanu nodded, his mind already racing. He wasn't one to seek conflict, but the image of Sonny cowering from the kick was burned into his memory. Those bikers needed to be held accountable, not just for Sonny, but for everyone they'd harassed. As Keanu walked back towards his car, Sonny trotting cautiously beside him, he made a silent promise. This wasn't over. The call for justice. Keanu Reeves sat in the driver's seat of his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than he realized. Sonny rested in the passenger seat, his head on Keanu's lap, seeking comfort after the incident. The dog had calmed down, but his usually wagging tail was still tucked between his legs. Keanu glanced down at Sonny, running a hand over the dog's soft fur. "You're okay, buddy," he said softly. But his words weren't just for the dog. They were for himself too. The scene at the park replayed in his mind. The laughter, the cruel kick, and the bikers walking away like they owned the world. Keanu exhaled slowly, his resolve hardening. He wasn't the type to let things slide, especially not when it came to someone hurting an innocent animal. But this wasn't just about Sonny anymore. Those bikers had a pattern of intimidation, and Keanu was determined to do something about it. His first call was to a trusted friend, Detective Mike Alvarez, a veteran of the LAPD. Mike was someone Keanu had worked with during charity events for underprivileged youth, and their connection had grown into a solid friendship. The phone rang twice before Mike's gruff voice answered. "Reeves. Been a while. What's up?" "Mike," Keanu began, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "I need your help." The report. Within an hour, Keanu found himself in a quiet corner of the police precinct, seated across from Detective Alvarez. The stark fluorescent lights overhead hummed softly as Keanu recounted the incident, his words measured but firm. "They've been harassing the local businesses, intimidating people, and now they've targeted my dog," Keanu finished. This wasn't an accident. It felt deliberate. Mike nodded, jotting down notes in a well-worn notebook. "We've had reports about that group before," he said, tapping his pen thoughtfully. "They're part of a loose biker gang called the Iron Claws. Not a huge operation, but they've been causing problems in the area. Vandalism, minor assaults, even some suspected drug distribution." Keanu's jaw tightened. "So why haven't they been stopped?" Mike sighed. "We've been building a case, but nothing has stuck. They're smart, keep their activities just under the radar. If we're going to act, we need something solid. And what happened to your dog could be the break we've been looking for." Keanu leaned forward, his expression intense. "Whatever you need from me, I'll help. This has to stop." Mike studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right. We'll start by documenting the incident. I'll need a formal statement from you, and we'll get your dog checked out by a vet to confirm any injuries." Keanu agreed, grateful for the detective's professionalism. But even as they outlined the plan, a part of him itched for more direct action. He wasn't a violent man, but the image of Sonny's frightened eyes still haunted him. Uncovering the network. Later that day, Keanu took Sonny to a trusted veterinarian, Dr. Emily Carter. The clinic was a serene space, painted in soft pastels with framed pictures of happy pets adorning the walls. Dr. Carter greeted Keanu with a warm smile, though her demeanor quickly shifted to concern as he explained what had happened. "Sonny's lucky," Dr. Carter said after a thorough examination. "There's no lasting physical damage, but the psychological impact could take time to heal. Dogs are resilient, but they remember trauma." Keanu nodded, his hand resting on Sonny's head. "I'll do whatever it takes to help him recover." Dr. Carter handed Keanu a printed report detailing her findings, which would serve as evidence for the police investigation. "This should help," she said, "and if you need me to testify, I'll be there." "Thank you," Keanu replied sincerely. As he left the clinic, Sonny trotting beside him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about retaliation, it was about protecting others from suffering the same fate. The stakeout. That evening, Keanu decided to take matters a step further. He wasn't one to sit idly by, and he trusted his instincts. After ensuring Sonny was safe at home with a trusted neighbor, he drove back to the area near the park. This time, he wasn't looking for a peaceful stroll. He was looking for answers. Parking a few blocks away, Keanu blended into the shadows, his hood pulled low. He knew the bikers wouldn't recognize him right away. His fame was more subdued in real life than it was on the big screen. He strolled casually towards the park, his sharp eyes scanning the area. It didn't take long to spot them. The same group of bikers had gathered near a dilapidated warehouse just off the main street. Their loud laughter echoed in the night as they drank and smoked, their motorcycles lined up like trophies outside the building. Keanu observed from a safe distance, careful not to draw attention to himself. He noticed their patches more clearly now. A snarling tiger with extended claws. He committed every detail to memory, knowing it could be valuable later. As the hours passed, Keanu's patience was rewarded. He spotted two of the bikers stepping away from the group, heading towards a smaller side entrance of the warehouse. They carried a duffel bag, their movements quick and deliberate. Keanu's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a casual hangout, it was an operation. He pulled out his phone and took several discreet photos, capturing the bikers, the duffel bag, and the warehouse itself. This was evidence he could bring to Mike. The connection. The next morning, Keanu met with Mike again, this time at the precinct. He laid out the photos and shared his observations from the previous night. "They're running something out of that warehouse," Keanu said. "I'm sure of it." Mike examined the photos, his expression grim. "This lines up with some intel we've received. The Iron Claws have been linked to a larger network of drug distribution. If we can tie them to this, we'll have enough to shut them down." Keanu leaned back in his chair, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. But Mike wasn't finished. "We'll need to move carefully. If this is as big as it seems, we can't afford any missteps. The operation has to be airtight." Keanu nodded. "Whatever it takes. Just promise me one thing. Make sure they're held accountable for what they've done." Mike met his gaze, his voice firm. "You have my word." The calm before the storm. That evening, as Keanu sat on his couch with Sonny curled up beside him, he reflected on the events of the past 2 days. What had started as a peaceful walk in the park had spiraled into something much larger. But Keanu wasn't deterred. If anything, he felt more determined than ever. He glanced down at Sonny, who was dozing peacefully. "We'll get through this, buddy," he murmured. "I promise." Outside, the city buzzed with life, unaware of the storm brewing in the shadows. Keanu knew the coming days would be challenging, but he was ready. For Sonny, for the community, and for justice, he would see it through to the end. Shadows and strategy. The warehouse loomed in the dim light of early evening, its facade weathered and cracked, a silent witness to years of illicit activity. Keanu Reeves parked his car several blocks away, blending into the anonymity of the industrial district. This time, he wasn't alone. Detective Mike Alvarez and a small, specialized task force had joined him. They were ready to put an end to the Iron Claw's reign of intimidation and crime. Mike leaned against the hood of an unmarked police SUV, reviewing a tactical map of the warehouse. His team surrounded him, a mix of plainclothes officers and SWAT members dressed in dark gear. Keanu stood slightly apart, his sharp eyes scanning the scene, his body tense with anticipation. "Reeves," Mike called, gesturing him over. "We're about to brief the team. You've been close to this from the start, so you should hear this too." Keanu approached, his face calm but focused. Mike pointed to the map. "Based on your intel and our surveillance, we've confirmed the Iron Claws are running a distribution hub here. Drugs, stolen goods, and possibly even weapons. Tonight, we're going in." One of the SWAT officers, a woman with a serious expression, spoke up. "We've identified 2 main entrances and a side door that leads directly to the storage area. Our goal is to secure the building, seize evidence, and apprehend as many of them as possible." Keanu listened intently, his jaw tightening as he imagined the chaos inside the warehouse. "What happens if they resist?" he asked. Mike's gaze met his, steady and reassuring. "We're prepared for that. But our goal is to de-escalate wherever possible. You've done your part, Keanu. Stay back tonight. Let us handle the rest." Keanu hesitated, his protective instincts warring with his trust in Mike and the team. He wanted to see this through, but he knew the risks. "I'll stay out of the way," he finally said. "But I'm not leaving. Not until I know it's over." Mike nodded, respecting Keanu's resolve. "Fair enough. Just stay safe. The operation begins." As darkness fell, the task force moved into position. Keanu watched from a nearby rooftop, his heart pounding as he observed the team's silent approach. The officers moved like shadows, their movements precise and coordinated. Mike led the charge, his radio crackling with quiet updates as the team prepared to breach. Team Alpha, ready at the main entrance. Team Bravo, in position at the side door. Keanu's fists clenched as he watched the tension build. From his vantage point, he could see the bikers inside the warehouse, their silhouettes moving amidst stacks of crates and flickering overhead lights. They were oblivious to the storm about to descend upon them. At exactly 9:00 p.m., the operation began. With a deafening crash, Team Alpha burst through the main entrance, their shouts echoing through the building. "LAPD, get on the ground. Hands where we can see them." Simultaneously, Team Bravo breached the side door, cutting off any potential escape routes. The bikers reacted with a mix of confusion and aggression. Some froze, their hands raised in surrender, while others lunged for weapons hidden among the crates. The SWAT officers acted swiftly, using non-lethal methods to subdue the more aggressive members. Keanu's breath caught as he saw Scarface, the man who had kicked Sonny, grab a crowbar and swing it wildly at an officer. Before he could land a blow, another officer tackled him to the ground, disarming him with practiced efficiency. From his perch, Keanu could see the operation unfolding like a scene from one of his films, but this was all too real. The bikers were rounded up one by one, their protests and curses falling on deaf ears as they were handcuffed and led outside. The unexpected turn. As the operation continued, Mike's voice crackled over the radio. "We've secured the main area, proceeding to the storage room." Keanu shifted his focus to the warehouse's side, where several officers were breaking into a locked room. When the door finally gave way, a wave of tension rippled through the team. "Mike," one of the officers said, his voice grave, "you need to see this." Keanu couldn't see inside the room from his position, but the sudden shift in the officer's demeanor told him it was serious. He grabbed his phone, dialing Mike. The detective answered quickly. "What's going on?" Keanu asked. Mike's voice was tight. "We found something bigger than we expected. It's not just drugs and stolen goods. They'd got firearms, military grade, and something else. What else? Keanu pressed. Mike hesitated before answering. Dogfighting. They've been running a ring in the back room. Keanu's stomach turned at the words. His fists clenched, and he had to remind himself to breathe. How bad is it? Bad, Mike replied. There are cages, injured dogs. It's going to take a while to sort through everything. Keanu's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about Sonny anymore. These people had been exploiting and hurting countless innocent animals, and it was finally coming to light. A voice for the voiceless. By the time the operation concluded, the warehouse was swarming with officers and animal rescue workers. Keanu stood near the perimeter, watching as the injured dogs were carried out in crates and loaded into waiting vans. Sonny's face flashed in his mind, and Keanu felt a surge of gratitude that his own dog was safe. But seeing the battered animals reminded him of why he had gotten involved in the first place. This wasn't just about stopping the iron claws. It was about ensuring justice for every victim they had left in their wake. Mike approached, his expression weary but triumphant. It's over, he said. We've got enough evidence to shut them down for good. Keanu nodded, his eyes fixed on the rescue workers. What happens to the dogs? They'll go to shelters and foster homes, Mike said. And the ones responsible for this, they'll face felony charges. This operation just turned into one of the biggest busts this district has seen in years. A small smile tugged at the corner of Keanu's lips. Good. They deserve it. The next step. The following day, the story broke across every major news outlet. Celebrity Keanu Reeves aids in takedown of notorious biker gang, the headlines read. But Keanu wasn't interested in the publicity. Instead, he focused on helping the rescued animals, donating generously to the shelters that had taken them in. Sonny, now back to his playful self, seemed to sense the weight lifting from Keanu's shoulders. The dog wagged his tail enthusiastically as they walked through the same park where the ordeal had begun. This time, Keanu walked with a lighter heart, knowing he had made a difference, not just for Sonny, but for so many others who couldn't fight for themselves. The fallout. The morning after the warehouse raid, Keanu Reeves sat at his dining table, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand. Sonny lay sprawled at his feet, his tail gently wagging, as if sensing his owner's contemplative mood. On the table before Keanu was a spread of newspapers and his laptop, all of which carried the same explosive headline. Celebrity Keanu Reeves helps bust notorious biker gang in Los Angeles. He had expected the operation to garner attention, but the sheer volume of coverage was overwhelming. Every outlet seemed to highlight his involvement, portraying him as a quiet hero who stepped up when the community needed him. Yet Keanu felt conflicted. This wasn't about him. It was about justice for Sonny and the other victims. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Keanu stood, smoothing his hoodie before opening the door. Detective Mike Alvarez stood on the other side, holding a folder and wearing an expression that spoke of equal parts satisfaction and exhaustion. "Morning, Reeves," Mike said, stepping inside. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Keanu replied, gesturing to the couch. "Coffee?" Mike shook his head, setting the folder on the coffee table. "I'm good. Just wanted to give you an update on last night's operation." Keanu sat across from him, Sonny resting his head on Keanu's knee. "How bad was it?" he asked. Mike exhaled heavily. "Worse than we thought. Aside from the drugs and weapons, we found extensive evidence of dogfighting, ledgers, equipment, even footage. It wasn't just a side hustle. It was a full-blown operation." Keanu's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively stroking Sonny's fur. "And the dogs?" "We rescued 37, Mike said. "Most are injured, some severely. They're in the care of local shelters now. The shelter staff say it's going to take time to rehabilitate them, but they're hopeful." Keanu nodded, his expression hardening. "And the bikers?" "Every single one of them is behind bars," Mike replied. "The charges range from drug trafficking to animal cruelty. Your photos and testimony help tie everything together." For the first time that morning, a small smile flickered across Keanu's face. "Good," he said. "They deserve everything coming to them." A community response. The news of the raid spread quickly, and the community rallied around the rescued animals. Donations poured into local shelters, and volunteers signed up in record numbers to help care for the dogs. Keanu, always preferring action over words, decided to do more than just donate money. He reached out to a friend who ran an animal rescue foundation, offering his time and platform to raise awareness. A week later, Keanu found himself at a bustling animal adoption event in the heart of Los Angeles. The event, organized by the shelter housing the rescued dogs, was designed to help them find new, loving homes. Keanu had kept his involvement quiet, not wanting to overshadow the true purpose of the event. Sunny trotted happily at Keanu's side as they wandered through the rows of tents and adoption booths. The air buzzed with activity, families meeting dogs, volunteers explaining care routines, and children giggling as they played with the more energetic pups. Keanu stopped at a booth where a volunteer was introducing the shy pit bull to a couple. The dog, a gray and white female with scars on her muzzle, trembled slightly but wagged her tail as the couple gently stroked her fur. "She was one of the fighters," the volunteer explained. "But she's incredibly sweet, just needs a little time to trust again." Keanu crouched down, his presence drawing the dog's hesitant gaze. "Hey there, girl," he said softly, his voice soothing. "You're safe now." The dog stepped forward cautiously, sniffing Keanu's outstretched hand before giving it a tentative lick. Keanu smiled, his heart swelling with pride for her bravery. As the couple finalized the adoption paperwork, Keanu stood and continued through the event. He stopped frequently to greet the dogs and thank the volunteers, his quiet presence inspiring those around him. Scarface's reckoning. Meanwhile, at the county jail, the bikers were facing the weight of their actions. Scarface, whose real name was revealed as Travis Gage, sat in a stark interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the metal table. Across from him sat Detective Alvarez, his demeanor calm but unyielding. "We've got you on multiple charges," Mike said, sliding a file across the table. "Drug trafficking, illegal possession of firearms, and animal cruelty. You're looking at decades behind bars." Travis sneered, his bravado faltering under the detective's steady gaze. "You think you've got it all figured out, huh? You don't know the half of it." Mike leaned forward, his voice lowering. "Then enlighten me. Who else is involved? Who's funding this?" Travis hesitated, his bravado slipping further. He wasn't just facing prison time. He was facing betrayal from those higher up in the operation. He glanced at the two-way mirror, knowing his every move was being observed. "All right," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I'll talk. But I want a deal." A ripple effect. As the investigation expanded, the information provided by Travis led to the dismantling of an even larger criminal network. The Iron Claws were just one branch of a sprawling organization responsible for drug distribution, illegal gambling, and animal trafficking across multiple states. Keanu, while not directly involved in the ongoing investigation, kept a close eye on the updates. His decision to act had set off a chain reaction that was making a tangible difference, and he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. A new beginning. Several weeks later, Keanu returned to the park where the ordeal had begun. This time, he wasn't alone. Sunny trotted at his side, his tail wagging enthusiastically, and Keanu carried a leash for a second dog, a young, playful pit bull he had adopted from the shelter. The dog, whom he had named Nova, had been one of the rescued fighters. Though her scars told a story of hardship, her bright eyes and wagging tail spoke of resilience and hope. As they walked through the park, Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The bikers were behind bars, the dogs were finding loving homes, and the community had come together in a way that reminded him of humanity's capacity for good. Stopping at a bench, Keanu sat down, watching as Sunny and Nova played together. He sipped his coffee, the peaceful morning reminding him of why he had fought so hard. In that moment, Keanu realized something profound. While the world could be cruel, it was also filled with people willing to stand up and make a difference. And sometimes, all it took was one act of courage to set change in motion. Community healing. The energy at the adoption event buzzed with a mix of joy and resolve. Families mingled with volunteers, meeting dogs that had spent months, some years, living in cages, fighting for survival. Keanu Reeves, blending in among the crowd with his signature understated demeanor, felt a deep sense of pride and humility as he watched the connections forming. Nearby, a group of children gathered around a playful golden retriever mix. The dog barked excitedly as the kids tossed a ball back and forth, its wagging tail a testament to its newfound happiness. Keanu smiled softly, his hand resting on Sonny's head. "Hey, you're Keanu Reeves," a young boy exclaimed, pointing at him. "I saw you on TV last night." Keanu chuckled and knelt to the boy's level. "Guilty as charged," he said. "What's your name?" "Jake," the boy replied, grinning. "Are you gonna adopt another dog today?" Keanu glanced at Sonny, who tilted his head as if understanding the question. "You never know, Jake," Keanu replied. "But I think I've got my hands full with this guy for now." As the boy laughed and ran back to his parents, Keanu's attention was drawn to a volunteer waving him over. The woman, wearing a bright green shelter t-shirt, held the leash of a gray and white pit bull, one of the more skittish rescues. "Mr. Reeves," the volunteer said, her tone hesitant but hopeful, "this is Bella. She's one of the dogs we pulled from the warehouse. She's been through a lot, but she's made incredible progress. We were wondering if you'd like to meet her." Keanu knelt down slowly, extending a hand toward Bella. The dog sniffed cautiously, her scared muzzle twitching as she processed his scent. After a moment, her tail wagged hesitantly, and she took a tentative step closer. "Hey, Bella," Keanu said softly, his voice gentle and calming. "You're a brave girl, aren't you?" Bella licked his hand, and Keanu's heart swelled. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also the resilience, the same unbreakable spirit he had seen in Sonny when he first adopted him. "She's incredible," Keanu said, standing and meeting the volunteer's gaze. "Thank you for everything you've done for her." The volunteer smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. It means the world to us that someone like you is helping shine a light on this." Facing the media. The day after the event, Keanu found himself in a different kind of spotlight. News outlets had been relentless in their coverage of the Iron Claws bust, and Keanu's involvement had catapulted the story into national headlines. Despite his preference for privacy, Keanu agreed to sit for a brief interview, knowing it could help amplify the cause. The set was modest, just a few chairs and a camera crew. The interviewer, a poised woman named Sarah, greeted Keanu warmly as he took his seat. "Thank you for joining us, Mr. Reeves," Sarah began. "Your actions over the past few weeks have sparked a wave of support for animal welfare. Can you tell us why this cause means so much to you?" Keanu took a moment to collect his thoughts. "I've always believed in standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves," he said. "When my dog, Sonny, was hurt, it wasn't just about him. It was about the bigger picture, about making sure no one else, human or animal, has to go through something like that." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You've inspired countless people to take action. What message would you like to share with them?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but impassioned. "Kindness matters. Compassion matters. If you see something wrong, don't turn away. Speak up, take action, and make a difference, even if it feels small. Change starts with each of us." A new mission. As the interview aired across networks, Keanu found his inbox flooded with messages from people inspired by his story. Many shared their own experiences with rescuing animals or standing up against cruelty. Others asked how they could help. Rather than let the moment pass, Keanu decided to turn this momentum into lasting impact. He partnered with several animal welfare organizations to launch an initiative called Voices for the Voiceless. The program focused on rescuing abused animals, advocating for stricter laws against cruelty, and providing resources to shelters nationwide. Keanu threw himself into the project, using his platform to amplify the initiative's reach. Sunny became the unofficial mascot of the campaign, his story of resilience resonating with audiences around the world. Closure with Scarface. One afternoon, weeks after the warehouse raid, Keanu received a call from Mike Alvarez. Reeves, Mike said, his tone serious. Tratus Gage, Scarface, wants to speak with you. Keanu frowned. Why me? He claims he has something important to say, Mike replied. It's your call, but I think it might give you some closure. After a moment's hesitation, Keanu agreed. The meeting was arranged at the county jail, in a secure visitation room. Keanu entered the room, his posture calm but firm. Across the table sat Travis, his once defiant demeanor replaced by a weary resignation. You wanted to see me, Keanu said, his tone measured. Travis avoided his gaze at first, his hands fidgeting on the table. Finally, he spoke. Look, I don't expect forgiveness, he muttered. I've done bad things, hurt a lot of people and animals. But seeing those dogs get rescued, seeing what you did, it made me think. Keanu's expression didn't waver. And Travis sighed, meeting Keanu's gaze for the first time. I'm done with that life. I'll give the cops whatever they need to shut the whole operation down for good. It's too late for me, but maybe it's not too late to make things right. Keanu studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finally, he nodded. It's never too late to do the right thing, but it's up to you to prove it. Travis nodded solemnly, and Keanu stood, turning to leave. As he exited the room, he felt a surprising sense of peace. He couldn't change the past, but perhaps in some small way, he had influenced the future. A movement ignited. The weeks following the rescue operation were a whirlwind of activity. Keanu Reeves found himself thrust into an unexpected role, an advocate for change. What had started as a single act of justice for his dog Sunny had evolved into something much larger, a growing movement dedicated to protecting the vulnerable. The Voices for the Voiceless initiative had gained traction faster than anyone could have predicted. Donations poured in from around the world, and shelters across the United States reported record-breaking adoptions. The rescue dogs from the Iron Claws raid became the face of the campaign, their stories of survival inspiring millions. Keanu, while overwhelmed by the attention, remained focused on the mission. He knew firsthand the power of storytelling and used his platform to amplify the voices of those who had dedicated their lives to animal welfare. A gala for change. 3 months after the raid, the first Voices for the Voiceless Gala was held in downtown Los Angeles. The event brought together activists, philanthropists, and celebrities, all united by a shared goal: to end animal cruelty and provide better resources for shelters. Keanu stood backstage, adjusting the cuffs of his black suit. He wasn't one for grand events, but tonight was different. This wasn't about him. It was about the movement. Sunny, freshly groomed and wearing a small bow tie, sat at his side, wagging his tail. You ready for this, boy? Keanu murmured, scratching behind Sunny's ears. The dog barked softly in response, his enthusiasm infectious. When Keanu stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. He held up a hand to quiet the crowd, his humble demeanor instantly commanding attention. Thank you, he began, his voice steady. When I adopted Sunny, I had no idea the journey we were about to embark on. He was just a scared, scrappy dog who needed a home. But over time, he taught me something profound. Compassion isn't just about what we feel, it's about what we do. The audience listened intently as Keanu recounted the events leading up to the raid and the impact it had on his life. Sunny's story isn't unique, he continued. Every day, animals face unimaginable cruelty, and it's up to us to be their voice. That's why we're here tonight, to make sure their stories don't end in silence. The room erupted in applause once more as Keanu stepped back, allowing a rescued pit bull named Bella to be brought on stage by a volunteer. Bella, once a victim of dogfighting, now wagged her tail confidently, her scars a testament to her resilience. As the gala continued, guests pledged millions to the cause, ensuring the initiative's future. Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The movement was no longer his alone. It belonged to everyone in that room and beyond. A return to normalcy. Despite the movement's success, Keanu longed for the simplicity of his daily routines with Sunny. After weeks of public appearances and interviews, he finally had a quiet day to himself. He decided to take Sunny and Bella, now fully integrated into his household, for a walk in the same park where the ordeal had begun. The morning was crisp, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Sunny led the way, his tail wagging furiously, while Bella trotted beside Keanu, her newfound confidence evident in her posture. As they rounded a familiar bend, Keanu noticed a group of children playing with their dogs. A boy broke away from the group, running up to him with wide eyes. "Hey, you're the guy who saved all those dogs," the boy exclaimed, his enthusiasm contagious. Keanu chuckled. "I guess I am," he said, crouching to pet the boy's golden retriever. "Thanks for what you did," the boy continued. "I adopted Max because of you." Keanu's chest tightened with emotion. He reached out to ruffle the boy's hair. "You're the real hero, kid. Max is lucky to have you." As the boy ran back to his friends, Keanu felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The ripples of his actions had reached farther than he'd ever imagined. Confronting the past. Later that afternoon, Keanu received an unexpected call from Detective Mike Alvarez. The biker gang members were due in court, and Keanu's presence was requested as a witness. The courthouse was a stark, imposing structure, its marble walls radiating an air of finality. Keanu arrived early, dressed in a simple black suit, his expression somber. He wasn't there for revenge. He was there for accountability. As he entered the courtroom, his gaze fell on Travis Gage, aka Scarface, seated at the defense table. Gone was the brash arrogance that had defined their earlier encounters. Travis looked weary, his shoulders slumped as if the weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. Keanu took the stand, recounting the events of that fateful day with clarity and precision. He spoke not just of Sunny's ordeal, but of the broader impact the gang's actions had on the community. When it was Travis's turn to speak, he surprised everyone. "I'm guilty," he said, his voice hoarse. "I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make it right." The courtroom murmured in shock as Travis outlined his intention to cooperate fully with law enforcement, providing information that would dismantle the gang's larger network. For the first time, Keanu saw a glimmer of remorse in the man's eyes. Building a legacy. Months passed, and the momentum of Voices for the Voiceless showed no signs of slowing. Keanu worked tirelessly to expand the initiative, partnering with lawmakers to push for stricter animal cruelty laws. His efforts culminated in the passage of new legislation, providing greater protection for animals and harsher penalties for offenders. On the one-year anniversary of the raid, Keanu hosted a community celebration at the same park where it all began. Families gathered with their pets, enjoying music, food, and games. Rescue dogs like Bella, now thriving in their new homes, were celebrated as symbols of hope and resilience. Keanu stood near a banner that read 1 year of Voices, a celebration of change. Sunny and Bella sat at his feet, their tails wagging as they watched children play. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the park, Keanu took the stage one last time. "This isn't the end," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's just the beginning. Together, we've shown that compassion can change the world. Let's keep going." The crowd erupted in cheers, their applause carrying into the night. And as Keanu looked out over the sea of smiling faces, he felt a profound sense of purpose. What had started as a single act of courage had blossomed into a movement, a legacy of hope that would endure for generations. A legacy solidified. A year after the Voices for the Voiceless movement began, Keanu Reeves found himself reflecting on the unexpected journey that had transformed his life. From a simple walk in the park with Sunny to becoming a global advocate for animal welfare, the experience had been nothing short of life-changing. But Keanu wasn't finished. His work had sparked something bigger than he ever anticipated, and now it was time to ensure the movement endured long after he was gone. A new beginning. Keanu stood in the middle of a vast piece of land just outside Los Angeles, his eyes scanning the rolling hills and open fields. It was a quiet place, surrounded by trees, and bathed in the soft light of the morning sun. This land would soon become the home of the Voices Sanctuary, a state-of-the-art rescue and rehabilitation center for animals. The sanctuary had been his dream ever since the raid on the Iron Claws warehouse. With the funds raised through the gala and donations from supporters worldwide, the vision was finally coming to life. The facility would house rescued animals, provide veterinary care, and serve as a community hub for education and advocacy. Keanu walked alongside a group of architects and project managers, discussing plans for the sanctuary's layout. Sunny and Bella followed closely, their tails wagging as they explored the open space. The main building will include veterinary facilities, training areas, and administrative offices, the lead architect explained. We're also designing individual spaces for dogs, cats, and other animals, each tailored to their specific needs. Keanu nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. Make sure there's plenty of outdoor space, he said. These animals deserve to feel free. The community comes together. As construction began, Keanu invited volunteers from across the country to help. Animal lovers, advocates, and even those who had adopted rescued dogs came together to lend a hand. The sanctuary became a symbol of hope, a place where people could channel their compassion into action. One afternoon, while working alongside a group of volunteers, Keanu overheard a young woman sharing her story. She had adopted a pit bull named Duke from the Iron Claws raid and credited the dog with helping her overcome a difficult period in her life. Duke was scared at first, she said, her voice filled with emotion. But he taught me about resilience. He reminded me that it's okay to trust again. Keanu smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. Stories like hers were the reason he had fought so hard to make the sanctuary a reality. The unveiling. Months later, the Voices Sanctuary was ready. The grand opening drew a crowd of thousands, from local families to global supporters of the movement. The event featured live music, adoption booths, and guided tours of the new facility. Keanu stood at the entrance, welcoming visitors with Sunny and Bella by his side. As people marveled at the sanctuary's design and the care given to every detail, Keanu felt a wave of gratitude for everyone who had made it possible. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Keanu took the stage, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. This sanctuary is more than just a place. It's a promise, he said. A promise to stand up for the voiceless, to fight for justice, and to build a world where compassion triumphs over cruelty. As the crowd erupted in applause, Keanu cut the ribbon, officially opening the sanctuary. Cheers filled the air as families and volunteers streamed inside, eager to see the fruits of their labor. Unexpected allies. The success of Voices for the Voiceless began to attract the attention of influential figures beyond the animal welfare community. Politicians, business leaders, and even rival gangs began reaching out, offering support and resources. One day, Keanu received an unexpected visit from a man named Carlos Ortega, a former gang member who had turned his life around. Carlos now ran a program that helped at-risk youth find purpose through community service. I heard about what you did with the Iron Claws, Carlos said, his voice earnest. I used to be on the other side of this fight, but now I want to help. Your sanctuary, it's inspiring. Let me bring some of my kids here. Maybe seeing this will show them a better path. Keanu agreed, moved by Carlos's sincerity. The partnership proved transformative, as the young participants found new purpose in caring for the animals. For many, It was their first experience of unconditional love and responsibility. Scarface's redemption. Meanwhile, Titus Gage, Scarface, had been working with law enforcement to dismantle the criminal network tied to the Iron Claws. His cooperation had significantly reduced his sentence, but more importantly, it had given him a chance to reflect on his actions. From prison, Travis began writing letters to animal welfare organizations, apologizing for his role in the cruelty and pledging to make amends. One of those letters found its way to Keanu. Keanu read the letter in silence, his emotions conflicted. The letter spoke of regret and a desire to atone, but Keanu knew words alone couldn't erase the past. Still, he chose to respond. His reply was brief but encouraging. Redemption isn't about what you say, it's about what you do. If you're serious about change, start by helping others. Global impact. As the sanctuary flourished, its influence spread worldwide. Other countries began adopting the Voices model, establishing sanctuaries and education programs inspired by Keanu's efforts. The movement had become more than just a response to cruelty. It was a global call to action. Keanu traveled to several of these new sanctuaries, meeting with local advocates and sharing his experiences. Each visit reinforced his belief that compassion was universal, capable of crossing borders and bridging divides. A quiet reflection. One evening, Keanu sat on the porch of the sanctuary's main building, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Sunny and Bella lay at his feet, their contented sighs blending with the gentle rustling of the trees. As the stars began to appear, Keanu felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been deeply rewarding. He had found a purpose beyond acting, a mission that would outlast him. "Good job, buddy," Keanu said softly, scratching Sunny's head. "We did it." Sunny wagged his tail, as if to say he understood. Epilogue. The ripple effect. Years later, the Voices Sanctuary stood as a beacon of hope, its impact felt across the globe. Generations of animals and people had been saved, their lives forever changed by the movement Keanu had ignited. Keanu, now older but no less driven, continued to work quietly behind the scenes. He never sought recognition, content to let the sanctuary speak for itself. And through it all, Sunny and Bella remained by his side, their unwavering loyalty a reminder of the bond that had started it all, a bond that proved one simple truth: compassion has the power to change the world.